Maven Lynn had rehearsed every detail of this night, the soft curl in her hair, the navy dress that made her eyes look brighter, the way she'd practiced a casual smile in the mirror so she wouldn't seem too nervous. After years of putting herself last, she was finally trying to step into something new, something hopeful, something that didn't remind her of all the things she thought she wasn't. Her first date in nearly 3 years. The restaurant was warm and gold-lit, filled with clinking glasses and the low hum of conversations blending into a comfortable backdrop. Maven arrived 10 minutes early, wiping her palms on the sides of her dress as she slid onto a bar stool to wait. The bartender noticed her immediately. He was tall, with quiet eyes that held a kind of depth that didn't demand attention, but kept it anyway. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms dusted with flower-like chalk evidence of someone who worked with their hands, not just their charm. "First time here?" he asked, offering a gentle smile. Maven nodded. "Yeah, I'm meeting someone." "Blind date?" She hesitated, then nodded again. "Well, if it makes you feel better," he said, leaning slightly closer. "You look like you're about to charm the life out of them." Maven laughed lightly, heat blooming in her cheeks. Compliments felt foreign, like old clothes that didn't quite fit yet. Before she could reply, her date walked in. Colin. His pictures hadn't prepared her for how sharply dressed he'd be. In-person crisp blazer, polished shoes, a confidence that filled the room long before he reached her. "Maven?" he said, giving her a nod instead of a smile. She stood, slightly startled by the coolness of his tone. "Hi." He didn't offer a hug, didn't reach for her hand, just motioned toward the booth the host had prepared for them. The bartender's brow tightened, but Maven missed it as she followed Colin across the room. They sat. Colin ordered without asking what she wanted. He checked his watch twice before she could complete her first sentence, and every time she began sharing something about herself, her photography, her volunteer work at the animal shelter, he interrupted with a story about himself. "And that's how I closed the deal in less than an hour," he said, swirling the wine in his glass, like he was conducting an orchestra. Maven smiled politely, trying to find her footing in the conversation. "That's impressive. I've never been great at negotiating myself." You don't need to be," he cut in. "Some people aren't wired for that kind of thing." She blinked. "What kind of thing?" "Success," he said simply, as if it were just a fact. Maven's throat tightened. The sentence settled in her chest like a stone. She picked up her drink to hide the sting in her eyes, only for her hand to shake. Just enough that the red wine sloshed over the rim and onto the front of her dress. The glass slipped, it toppled, it shattered on the floor with a sound that turned every head. Gasps, a few murmurs, a sigh from Colin. Maven froze, cheeks burning, heart plummeting. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, grabbing napkins, knees trembling beneath the table. Colin leaned back, shaking his head. "Wow, that was messy." "I didn't mean, yeah, but you did." His tone wasn't harsh, it was worse, dismissive, as if she were a child making a predictable mistake. Maven's throat tightened. Her hands continued trembling as she dabbed at the wine, dripping from the table edge. Then she heard a quiet voice beside her. "Hey, stop! You don't clean up messes alone here." It was the bartender. He crouched beside her with a towel, carefully sweeping the broken glass into a small tray. Unlike Colin, he didn't sigh. He didn't recoil. He didn't make her feel small. "Accidents happen," he whispered softly. She swallowed. Not to other people, just to me. He lifted his eyes to hers, warm, steady, unshaken. That's not true, he murmured. But even if it were, the way someone reacts to your accidents says everything about who they are. Maven's breath hitched. Colin scoffed. We're fine here, really. The bartender ignored him, turning back to Maven. Do you want a fresh drink, or do you want an excuse to step away from this table for a minute? Colin raised a brow. Seriously? Maven opened her mouth, unsure if she could speak, without her voice trembling. The bartender waited. His patience felt like safety. Maybe just a moment, she whispered. He stood and offered her a hand. She took it. He led her back to the bar, seating her gently at the very end where the shadows were softer, and the hum of the restaurant felt farther away. You're not clumsy, he said as he set a glass of water in front of her. You're nervous. There's a difference. Maven swallowed hard. I keep thinking I'm messing everything up. You're not messing anything up, he said with quiet firmness. You're just sitting across from the wrong person. She stared at him, really stared, at the sincerity in his face, the lack of judgment, the unexpected softness. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice lowering to a whisper meant for her alone. Maven. He hesitated, then said the words that stunned her. That man didn't look at you once the way someone does when they're lucky to meet you. Her breath caught, her heart stilled, her world shifted just slightly, but enough to feel it. Stay here as long as you need, he added. You don't owe him anything, not even the rest of a ruined evening. And for the first time that night, Maven believed him. Maven sat quietly at the end of the bar, her fingers wrapped around the cool glass of water the bartender had placed in front of her. The Paella restaurant felt different from here, less like a spotlight on her mistakes, more like a place she could breathe without apologizing for it. The bartender returned, placing a small folded towel beside her. For your dress, he said gently. She dabbed at the damp fabric, cheeks still warm with embarrassment, but her heartbeat had slowed. She could finally think again. Thank you, she murmured. He smiled softly. You don't need to thank me for treating you like a human being, Maven. Her throat tightened. I'm not used to people being kind when I embarrass myself. He leaned against the bar across from her, not intruding, just present. Maybe that's because the people you've been around were too small to hold big kindness. She blinked at him, surprised by how deeply his words struck. Do you want to go back to him? He asked gently. Maven shook her head without hesitation. No, I don't think there's anything to go back to. Good, he said simply. She laughed softly. You're very direct. He shrugged with a playful smile. I told you, I work with my hands, not with pretending. Then, lowering his voice, he added, But if you want to leave without making it awkward, I can help. How? She asked. He nodded discreetly toward the booth. He hasn't looked up from his phone in 10 minutes. I could tell him you stepped outside and forgot to come back. Maven snorted quietly. That sounds tempting. Or, he said, tapping the bar lightly, you can choose something even better. What's that? You can walk out with your head high and not explain anything to a man who never deserved your time to begin with. She looked down at her hands. It's been a long time since I chose myself. He softened. Then tonight's a good night to start. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Not romantically, not yet just two people meeting in the quiet space, between hurt and understanding. Finally, Maven inhaled slowly and stood. Can you Walk me to the exit, not because I'm scared, just because I want to leave the right way. His answer was immediate. Of course. He rounded the bar and offered his arm not dramatically, but respectfully, like someone giving her permission to take up space she'd never been allowed to occupy. She slipped her hand through. Colin didn't look up as they walked past. He didn't notice her dress was stained. He didn't notice the quiet dignity she carried now. But the bartender noticed everything. At the door, Maven paused. I never asked your name. He smiled almost shyly. It's Rowan. Rowan, she repeated softly. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't do anything special, he said. I just treated you the way someone should have a long time ago. She held his gaze, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years, a steady, grounded warmth that wasn't about sparks or destiny, but about recognition. Good night, Rowan. Good night, Maven. Get home safe, and don't let one bad date shrink you. She stepped outside, the cool air meeting her skin, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She felt possible. As she walked away, she didn't see Rowan watching from the doorway, hands in his pockets, a quiet smile tugging at his lips, not because he wanted anything from her, but because he knew he had witnessed someone choosing themselves. And that was a beginning all on its own.